Good morning, everyone. I
Mapay nga aga at maayong buntag, and it's good to be here in this platform. Buti na lang, Charles, na may advocate. Meron tayong ganitong platform na kahit busy ang mga schedule, we can just record first and still be with our IBCF brothers and sisters.
thank you for the privilege and the honor to be part of your conversations this morning about your discipleship as Christians. And part of that discipleship is how do we live our lives as Christians, even as young people, as student leaders. And one of the major areas that we need to grow in is our spirituality. And how do we relate that to our own day-to-day issues like sexuality? So this morning we will be talking about a little complicated and medyo
Controversial
controversial
topic.
sometimes topic about sexuality. But we know even as health professionals, we have been working with a lot of young people who have issues with their sexuality as well.
And this has implications, not just in our spiritual life, but even in the physical, emotional, mental state also of the person. That's why importante siyang pinag-uusapan, no? Even in the Christian, especially in the Christian community.
So this morning, Doc Medith, we just had a radio program show talking about adolescent sexual reproductive health. And even among Christian churches, it's not really a topic that's easily openly discussed.
Discussed.
So even as health professionals, health workers, we need to find spaces to have this kind of conversation. We are happy that InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, Central Visayas region unit has given us this opportunity to have this kind of conversations about this topic.
And even Dr. Charles, among Christians, this is I think lahat tayo na dumaan ng puberty or who's going through puberty and adolescence, may ganitong struggle. If not struggle, I think at the very least, questions na we try to grapple with at we try to look for answers. We have a 14-year-old daughter, and her questions are very difficult
Hard to answer.
to answer. But I think these are
yeah.
important questions. So we'll try to discuss and put a biblical framework. No, we're not saying we have all the 100% answers, but we continue to pray, that as we give the biblical framework, it's the Holy Spirit who will give us the wisdom to understand this and more importantly, apply this in our Christian life.
So this is a conversation. So we hope that this is a conversation. This is not something that's you would have prescriptive. We ourselves know we have been Christians for several years now, and we have also practiced our profession as doctors, and even we ourselves at this time we still grapple with this issue. So hopefully, this conversation about authentic sexuality will open up ways for us not to grow deeper in our walk as Christians, and hopefully this will provide as well as a framework for us to deal with our day-to-day struggles as young Christians living in your own context, especially now that you're in your university. So let me just share our screen so that we can start this conversation. So the topic that was requested of us to discuss in 30 minutes to 40 minutes is about authentic sexuality. However, there's a word there that we included, spirituality, because we want to integrate this to our own calling as Christians, that it's not something separate from our discipleship, that your sexuality is as much as part as your
it should be integrated
spiritual
in
calling.
your spiritual.
So that is our basic premise. And I think one of the reasons that we have, this is a little bit divisive or let's say controversial among even our Christian church because there's a lot of issues no, that surrounds sexuality. So Doc Medith, what are some of the questions that Christian may struggle with? No?
Sige, formal tayo masyado, ano, kasi galing pa lang kami recording ng radio program. So, nasanay kaming Doc Charles and Doc Medith. But you can call us Charlie and Medith or Charles and Medith. So, yeah, we work and we have ministry also with the young people. And so these are common questions that young people, especially Christians, struggle with. And I think some of this nga when we were growing up, these were also our questions. So una, no, is it okay for a Christian to go on dates? I think you've recently heard about the controversy on the I Kiss Dating Goodbye.
Si
Ano?
Joshua Harris.
Yeah, so that was very popular when we were still in IB. Nung camper ako, to speaker ka.
Talagang i-emphasize talaga yan.
So that was
when we were younger, way younger, the book of Joshua Harris,
Yeah,
Kiss
still
Dating
very
Goodbye was a
popular,
landmark
no?
book at some sort, became like some sort of authoritative source of what young Christians should do with regards to dating and physical intimacy.
Yeah, another question that Christians struggle with is, can a boy and a girl be good friends, even best friends, without sexual intimacy?
So-
Lalo na ngayon, that sexual intimacy is regarded as something common and normal, and when you're in a relationship and you don't do that, so para siyang something is wrong with your relationship. So this is a question that Christians might struggle with. And then the third is, can you be a Christian and gay at the same time? Mahirap sagutin to, no? But yeah, I think there are frameworks in the Bible.
Yeah, so later on, hopefully, we will provide some sort of a way for us to think about this issue because we don't say that we have the answer to this, but there could be possible ways of approaching this that is biblical, that is rooted to the Word of God, and at the same time expresses compassion and humility as well towards our other fellow human beings.
And the next question is very real to us. I am sure some of us, if not all of us here, have LGBTQ plus. Marami na tong mga categories ngayon, friends, who are interested also in the gospel. And how do how do we engage them? How do we bring them to church? And what should be our stand? So we do have a lot of good friends, who consider themselves as part of LGBTQ.
So even with the issue of LGBTQ plus, different Christian churches, different denominations, different traditions might have different perspectives, and we respect that. There is no unanimity, with regards to their place in the church, and even theologians and pastors are struggling with this issue even now. So this is really something that we need to continue having conversation even beyond this time that we have.
And then how can single people, marami din tayong friends who are single in church, how can single people in church best express their calling in our faith communities? I think that's a very important question.
So yung bang, do we value them more or less? How do we look at singleness now in the church? So those are some of the things that in the background, baka iba sa inyo mayroong ganitong mga issues or your friends are struggling with. And hopefully, our hope at the end of this conversation is that we will have not probably definitive answers, but a clearer understanding of the biblical ways to deal with this issue. So unang-una gusto natin, we'll just review a little bit about ano ba yung basic principles. So when you talk about authentic sexuality, ano bang ibig sabihin nun? And is there a biblical basis for understanding the differences between male and females? Ano ba yung pinanggagalingan ng pagkakaiba at ng kanilang pagkakapareho as human beings? So we'll try to describe a biblical framework that has been worked out by some of our Christian friends, with regards to the issue of our sex and gender and our relational unity as male and female.
Part also of this morning's conversation is trying to discuss the various explanations of human sexuality. So we'll try to look at literature, not just the Bible, but also ano bang sinasabi din sa academic world, no, in the sphere of literature, because what prevails in the society. And then we'll try to define the 4 dimensions of sexuality and discuss how to integrate, no, this authentic sexuality and spirituality. And we will end this with this, no, through a biblical model for relational sexuality.
So medyo malalim ano pinaghuhugutan ng mga ano natin. No, unang-una, there's a lot of controversy right now, especially in churches, no, maybe not here in the Philippines, but and for example in the US and in Europe with regards to tinatawag natin the difference between purity culture, especially in the US kasi malakas yung purity culture movement doon.
And also the hookup culture, which is also strong, no? It's prevailing.
So the dominant culture now in terms of sexual relationship is hookup culture, and Christians siguro minority yung nag-espouse ng purity culture, and sometimes this opposing worldview or cultural perspectives nagkakreate ng conflict, no, open conflict that sometimes become political conflict. So nakikita to natin sa US, no, yung differences, no, between these two camps, no. However, it is our assertion na yung hookup culture yung medyo liberal masyado na kind of perspective on sex and intimacy actually has a lot in common with purity culture. And bakit kaya ganun? What do they have in common? Kasi usually when you talk about purity culture, you're talking about this tradition, no, in example in the church, who really teach very strict views, no, about sex and relationships, no. And in fact, if you look at many Christian churches, yung kanilang traditional stance with regards to sex, no, and sexual intimacy and sexual desires is that it is something that you should not trust, your sexual desires, passion,
it's not something
reliable, no? It's something that you parang dinideny natin, no? It's not parang hindi natin nga pinag-uusapan yan most of the time.
It's like a taboo or awkward, no,
awkward,
at the very least.
So sa Christian churches, we don't really talk about this stuff, about sexual intimacy, because it's
and I think Charles, no, hindi lang to sa church, even society in general, even in families, di ba?
That's especially true, no?
And we don't really talk about it openly, even if children or members of the family have questions.
So yung consequence nun, parang hindi mo pinapansin, no? You don't acknowledge it, you don't feel it, which is actually the same thing that the hookup culture. Ito naman yung liberal na parang everything goes. It's okay to have multiple relationships and have casual intimacy kasi you don't really need to be emotionally engaged, diba? Parang one night stand, the same, no? Parang dinideny mo, so parang sineseparate mo yung physical intimacy with emotional relationships.
So when you say dissociation versus disconnection, anong
so parang ibig sabihin that your physical intimacy, sexual acts are separated from tawag relational tawag doon relationships, from relational connection.
So kung halimbawa
parang walang
kung kaibigan tayo, ano yun, we don't talk about it, or
it's like you can have like you separate, no, your sexual life, your sexual intimacy from your emotional relationship. So yun ang hookup culture, di ba?
So ano yun, you can have a serious relationship.
You can have physical intimacy without having emotional engagement. So yun ang hookup culture.
Kasi merong nagsasabi na may mga babaeng, this is the societal, and may mga babaeng siniseryoso sa relationship. So this is when you're going to attend parang serious, you don't have sex before marriage with that kind of person. But there are women, nasabi naman ng iba na ito, you can have the hookup culture kasi okay lang sa kanya. You're free to do. So these are two, but it's the same person who's doing that, no? So alin yun doon? So that's the dissociation.
So part, both of them have the consequence of this lifestyle. Yung lifestyle na ito, both the hookup culture, yung liberal, kahit sino, pero wala kang emotional connection, and those also don't want to hear it. The consequence is that they're actually getting disconnected. They're disconnecting their emotional, spiritual life from their physical, their bodies, no, the what they feel, no, in their bodies. And which is not actually, sabi pa nga natin, designed by God, because we have been designed by God as full experience, full the full experience of being alive. You know, you're not just a body, you're not just a soul, no, you're not just a spirit, you're all
So
of
you
this.
treat the person as one whole person.
And the reason behind that is that if you look at the Bible, it is God's design, that the design of God is you were designed to be in a relationship. So relational talaga. And the foundation of that is actually found in Genesis, because you know that later we'll take a look at that particular verse, because when God created us, He created us male and female, diba? Pupunta tayo doon. So there is this design at the very start na talaga relational tayo. We were meant to be in a relationship. And therefore, your sexuality, authentic sexuality, is part of that design, no? That you have to be engaged in a meaningful, person-centered relationship.
That's why even in health and medicine, Dr. Charles, we see problems when people, try to isolate themselves. Especially nung pandemic, no, parang ang dami nga nating data na nakuha. There was a sharp rise, no, in mental health issues, no, because some people were forced to go into isolation.
Wala kang contact,
wala
with
talagang
other
contact.
people.
So whether it is
during the lockdown,
sexual intimacy or intimate relationships, or just plain and simple.
Kahit yung pagbisita sa kaibigan, hindi mo magawa.
Hindi mo magawa. So it's very difficult. I think it's based on that premise, no, that we were created relational, no? Even in at the end of life, no, we have friends. So during the pandemic, mahirap makiramay sa namamatayan because you're not even allowed to visit, no, the dead, or may restrictions. So even to that level, no, parang at the end of life, you're longing for somebody or at least a group, no, or at least a person na pwede mong makausap.
So our premise here, the foundational principles, when you look about sexuality, therefore, it is established, no, in the creation of two differentiated person, no? So merong magkaiba, so male and female, but however, this sexuality is what allows unity to be established between them. So nagkakaroon ka ng relationship because it's God has made you, given you this sexuality as a means, ano? So it's a gift. So yung sexuality natin as persons, it's a gift God gave to us so that we come into a deeper level of knowing ourselves, others, and even God himself. No?
So in other words, Charles, no, when we say sexuality is a gift, this is meant to be enjoyed. May component yun na pleasure. It's pleasurable.
So we're saying that humans are born with a capacity to have sexual pleasure.
Because my perspective, no, that when you say sex, it's dirty. No? It's that's why we don't talk about it, no, because it's dirty. It's a taboo. But what we're saying now, no, according to the Bible, because it's part of the creation.
It's part of a health. If it's part of a healthy, caring, trustworthy environment, then it is functioning in the way God has designed it.
So may ganung context.
Mayroong siyang structure na that sexuality is actually expressed fully, and that is supposed to be in an emotionally caring and trustworthy environment. So therefore, when you talk about sexuality, you cannot really separate it from spirituality. Diba? Yung connection mo with God, because we have our being because we have been created by God and made in His image. So may connection yon, no? Yung sexuality and spirituality. And importantly as well, as human beings, we know that as human beings, we have fallen from grace. All of us have sinned. But the good thing is that when Christ redeemed us, when Christ died on the cross for us, He offered redemption and offered healing and restoration. When human beings fall, kasi because of the fall of man, the fall of human beings, because of sin, that purpose, that gift of God was distorted then. So when God in Christ redeemed us, that is part of what is being restored as well, yung design.
So kasama siya sa
Restoration and
and
healing and redemption. So that's why when we come to God and repentance, when we come to Christ, no matter our sexual history is, whether we have been promiscuous or we have been adulterous, diba? There's a lot of story in the Bible about prostitutes, an adulterous woman who experienced Christ's redemption. And part of that redemption is actually restoring that design that God has actually given to us, that gift of sexuality, to be able to know deeper, to experience deeper relationships with others.
Buti na lang sinama yun.
Buti na lang. Otherwise, paano na lang yung, for example, yung prostitute or the woman with several husbands. Ano na lang yung kanyang redemption to. So ito yung sinasabi ko, that the biblical foundation for the male and female differentiation and actually the unity that is brought about by this gift of sexuality is the verses in Genesis 1:26 to 28.
So it's in the first chapter, then God said, let us, with highlights and underlines. So para sa mga English major dito, grammar is also important in the Bible. So let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good.
So affirmation, being male and being female is good. No, it's very good. In fact, and yung source ng pagiging male and female, being different but being united as well, is actually the Godhead. No, yung Trinitarian concept natin, that God is Godhead. God is in a relationship, and because there's a plural there, let us make humankind in our
image. It's plural.
So that flows relational talaga yung natin, yung konsepto ng Godhead. He exists in community, and that is how we are supposed to relate, to each other. We are supposed to exist in community as male and female. So the foundation or being male and female is actually from the Godhead itself, the relationship within our Trinitarian God. So therefore, yun.
So may mga sinasabi tayo dito sa slide na to, share very controversial. Medyo malalim. And in celebration of Women's Month, maganda tong pag-usapan. So sexual differentiation does not mean hierarchy, but rather equality. So just to set the tone right now, we are also advocates of course, we're talking about gender equality, and we're saying that it's not hierarchical, but rather equality. So as the sociologist, I explained that.
Kasi nga, for the longest time, the Christian Church, diba, in historically, in terms of its traditions, it struggled with the concept of equality between men and women. Traditionally, dati, hindi nga pwedeng maging pastor yung babae.
Hindi pwedeng mag-sermon.
Hindi pwedeng mag-sermon, hindi pwedeng mag-teach. But now, because of this realization, the church has come to realize that women can actually serve as well in leadership positions. That's why in InterVarsity, we have student leaders are females. They are, because it derives from scripture that there is no hierarchical relationship in the Godhead, and that is, there's no hierarchical. It's reflected in the relationship between the male and female. There's no dominant sex, but we are equal in the sight of God. So that brings a lot of freedom, and possibilities as well for both sexes. That we are not in opposition to each other. We are not above each other, but we are actually called to be equal and to care and to love each other. And to share our lives with one another.
And I think that differentiation and diversity, is what makes that relationship interesting, Kasi you're different, but you're alike in some ways, and you're united in that relationship. Parang ang boring ng life, kung pareho lang kayo.
So therefore, isa ditong phrase, medyo malalim siya. Pero yung sinasabi dito na authentic sexuality is a longing for a rich sharing of our lives with one another. So ibig sabihin nun, our drive for intimacy, di ba? Kasi ito naman talaga yung ibig sabihin ng authentic sexuality. This desire, this attraction to another is actually a longing to share our life with somebody, with another. So it's actually a relational tawag doon, calling.
Sabi pa nga ni Anderson, no? Not the mating, but
the
the meeting,
meeting,
no? Is the essence. You cannot separate that from, but one
So
can't
it's,
be separated from the other on the creaturely level. Medyo malalim yung
kasi parang sometimes kasi we reduce all human relationship to sex. Na parang you can only be intimate if you are engaged in a sexual activity,
sa sexual
which is actually not, no? It is just a part of the whole way God has designed us, that we can relate to another person in a very deep level, and sexuality just helps us go into that. And itong framework na to actually summarizes, no, the explanation of human sexuality very quickly. So as Christians, we know, no, that the source of our differences and our unity comes from God. So reflection tayo that we are made in the image and likeness of God. However, we know from today as well, due to science and development, that many of our conception of human sexuality rooted din siya sa nature, no, genetic factors. May mga factors, that biological factors. For example, your XY chromosome determine, no, your genitalia, your what kind of physical
sexual
organs that you will
and even
have.
the hormones.
The hormones that courses
both
through your
different.
body. So this is explained by nature, our genes, ano. However, we also know that sexuality, the way we deal with our tawag doon, issues of sexuality, something to do also with
the environment,
we
the
will grow up in,
society.
yung family na pinanggalingan natin, yung culture kung saan tayo lumaki. Tapos yung mga gender norms, ano, ng kalipunan. For example,
Pag
today,
babae ka, pag nagbe-birthday, you give baby doll, no? Kasi babae
yung the way
ka.
you
Tapos,
raised up by society.
kung lalaki naman yung bata, you give a toy car.
So all of this, socio-cultural factors, biological factors, and even our spiritual, no, yung theistic natin na framework actually contributes, no, to our sexuality, no, as human beings.
So it's a total package.
In other words, it's not just one factor that defines
so that's why
who we are.
Kaya when you talk about sexuality, Charles, no, hindi siya madali because it's multifactorial. You'll be talking and dealing with many other factors that you have just shown, no, and the interaction between them.
So this is just kasi mga psychologists as well, mahilig ako sa mga frameworks, ano. So isa sa developmental theory of human sexuality is how we grow, sexually develop from birth, no, from our birth to our
even before birth, no,
even before, during
prenatal.
So a lot of the factors, no, that affect, for instance, during prenatal stage at birth stage are determined by your genes or hormones. So pag nasa tiyan ka pa lang ng nanay mo, it's the gene and the hormones that are determining, no, kung ano yung mangyayari sa human sexuality. However, birth tsaka going through infancy, it will be the mother, no, the environment in which the child is.
While you're in the
for
uterus.
example, nasa uterus ka, or pinanganak ka na, how you are taken care of by your mother, whether you are nurtured or well or not, will also affect, no, your sexuality as well. Tapos pagpunta mo ng early childhood, middle childhood, pre-adolescence, lalo-lalo na sa adolescence, ano, you are already affected by the rush of
raging hormones. Because may mga surge of hormones na according to medicine and to health, no, this affects the way people think, even emotions, no, and behavior, especially during this stage. That's why ito yung sinasabi, no, when that kung meron kayong mga, well, in the future magkaanak kayo, no, you will have a personal experience of how you will see, no, the difference between when the child was still young tapos pumunta siya nung puberty or adolescent stage, no. So magkaiba yon. Dati si Kayla, when we go out, I can dictate, no, anong isusuot. So sige, you wear this, and when you go to church, you wear this.
So yun ang
But
receptive
yeah,
environment,
when she became a teenager, no, meron na siyang sense of anong tawag noon,
may personal preferences
may
na siya.
personal preference na siya, no, and
Ayaw na ng damit.
and you cannot just dictate,
Yeah,
no, the child, kasi meron na siyang
because it is defined as well, yung culturally defined.
yes.
Meaning kasi yung peer group niya, anong sinusuot, yung barkada niya, ano nakikita niya sa TikTok, sa social media.
Also,
and hormones as well.
It changes the body configuration, eh? Kung dati iba yung shape ng katawan niya, when nagiging teenager, no, parang iniisip mo na rin, no, ano bang babagay dito, or nakakahiya pag ito yung gawin. So it has also something to do with that.
And then when we go into young adulthood and then to middle adulthood, this hormonal changes nagpapatuloy din siya, di ba? And of course, through this life stage, makikita natin na nag-iiba yung parang primary need, no, or let's say issue. For example, during early childhood, it's more of emotional security. Are they being protected, provided by their family? And then pag nasa adolescent period ka na, ano ba yung influence ng peer or ng culture, and how do you deal with your what you are going through, no, physically as well.
And peers are the most important people during this time. Kaya nga ginagawa natin sa anak natin, because ayaw na niyang sumama sa amin. So ginagawa namin, because importante sa kanya yung peers, no, the swim team. So kaming mga parents nag-uusap-usap na lang. So mag-outing tayo ng buong team, no. So that's why so in that way sasama na sila sa amin, and we also know what's happening. So we create that environment because you cannot insist, no, na wag kang pumunta
doon. Tayo na lang sumasama sa kanilang
so if you cannot beat them, you join them.
And then when you go into your young adulthood, you graduate college, and you go into your early family life, nandun na yung search for intimacy, yung meaningful same or opposite sex friendships, yung friendships gusto natin ng malalim na connection, no, to other people. And then of course the challenges also when you become older like us, how do you transition to your later adulthood, and how do you adapt not to the changing as well body, yung mga limitations na dati ginagagawa mo hindi mo na nagagawa.
So ibig sabihin nothing stays the same all throughout
our lifespan,
it develops and it changes.
Our issues that we deal as our sexuality as persons, it changes, the things that we grapple with through.
And it's amazing if you see also the left side, this parang all those changes, yung arrows are interchangeable. Parang our bodies are also prepared. I mean, the whole person has been prepared, to grapple with all these changes on the right, and vice versa. So hindi yun parang we were not created at one time and then bahala ka na sa buhay mo, Parang ikaw nang bahala. But if looking at this framework now, it shows us that with the many changes that's happening on the right side, may kaakibat din na maraming changes, pagbabago sa left side, which complements, And I think ang struggle doon is pag hindi mo na connect, yung what's in the left sa right. So yun yung sinasabi mo kaninang kakaroon ng dissonance or disconnection. So I think that's where the struggle comes in.
So both biological factors on the left, saka cultural factors or social environmental factors on the right contribute to your own journey as a sexual person.
And relationships help us to figure that out, Parang mahirap i-figure out yun mag-isa, But when we are in relationships na may nakakausap ka, may nagsasabi sa'yo at may nakikita ka rin, it makes it easier.
So very quickly lang, so that so for example kanina one of the questions that sinabi natin pwedeng i-grapple natin as question is how do you deal with your LGBTQ plus friends, and how do we understand where they are. So dito we'll try to summarize what are the dimensions of sexuality and how do we talk about them so that when we talk with our friends, at least we are communicating on the same level. Kasi minsan ano ba yung SOGI, ano ba yung sexual orientation, ano ba yung sexual identity, how is sex different from gender, and this leads to a lot of misunderstanding as well kung hindi hindi natin naintindihan yung mga ganitong terminology. So just to let us say set the tone, there are 4 ways, no, of looking at sexuality, 4 dimensions sexuality. The first one is your physical sex, no, or natal sex tawag doon, or sex at birth, ano. So kaya nga sabi natin, ano yung sex at birth, no? So that's either male or female based on your physical and biological features.
And this is why sa hospital, no, at birth, this data are very important. Nire-record to sa in the hospital records, no, because later on may mga implications, no, kung may mga pagbabago. No?
Yeah, because hindi na natin assume that yung definition ng sex will be static, no. So from birth nagkakaroon din siya ng eventually ng sexual identity. So a person's sexual identity refers to his or her view of oneself as a sexual person. Ano ba yung konsepto niya? Ano ba yung, how does she identify or she identify? So for example, you're male at birth. Do you identify yourself as male now that you are now a teenager or you're now an adult? That's your sexual identity.
So that's the person who decides.
So that's a
regardless
person,
of the physical.
Yeah, regardless of the
structures.
physical features, no, of the genitalia. Your sexual identity is how you view yourself, whether you're male or female, based on your own subjective perspective. Now, yung sexual orientation naman is who are you attracted to, no? Ano yung direction ng attraction mo, sexual attraction mo? So it could be heterosexual, it can be homosexual.
So when you say heterosexual,
you're attracted to the opposite
sex,
no? Or if you're attracted to the same sex, we call that as homosexual.
homosexual.
Or sometimes now we have what we call bisexual, you're attracted to both. And mayroon din tinatawag na fluid or pansexual.
Dati yung fluid, yung alam natin dyan, no, parang solid liquid.
Parang ano lang siya, state lang siya ng molecules.
But now,
ngayon, sexuality
yeah,
na rin siya. Orientation na siya. Ano?
When we were in the radio program also, sinabi natin merong asexual. No? Parang dati bacteria lang
bacteria,
yun.
Sexual, ano ba yun? Binary fission and sexual reproduction.
It also refers to sexual orientation. So talagang even the semantics, no, the terminologies, nomenclature, no, changes over time. So ganun ka tawag nito, mabilis yung pagbabago sa society.
And then finally, your gender role. Itong gender role naman, ito yung expectations ng society. So this is defined by culture. For example, babae ka, what are your expected roles?
So ito yung mga sinasabing gender.
Anong stereotypes?
Sa bahay, no, may tinatawag na gender division of labor. Pag babae ka, dapat ikaw nagluluto. Dapat ikaw naglalaban.
So this include like gender-based attitudes and interests, stereotypes and behavioral expectations.
Pag lalaki, dapat siya lang yung nagtatrabaho. And these are not, you know, prescribed since birth, no? These are parang cultural, no? And it depends on kung saang kultura ka din. But there are basic tenets na or principles ng mga gender role na kahit saang society ka siguro pumunta, no? Parang so generally yun yung
as student leaders, no, as Christians, at least it's good to be aware, no, that these are the things that are important now when you talk about sexuality. There are different dimensions. Now you could have your birth sex, you have your sexual identity, you could be transgender, you could be cisgender, pangender, etc. Pero din sexual orientation, which could be heterosexual, homosexual, sexual fluid, at meron din tinatawag na gender role. Now, pero in summary, no, so as Christians, so given the biblical framework and given today, what our society, when we talk about sexuality, ano ba yung pinag-uusapan? As Christians, as young leaders, how can we deal with these issues? And when we talk to our peers, sa ating mga kapwa estudyante, as Christians, what is the best way to deal with the issue of authentic sexual development and authentic sexuality? Now, so in summary, what we're saying here is that right now there is insufficient evidence to make causal statements in explaining the development of authentic or inauthentic sexuality. There's a lot of debate pa.
In other words, hindi siya linear, one-directional.
Na sinabi yung authentic sexuality. So for example, if you look at a gay person, wala siyang authentic sexuality. We do not know, ano ba yung bakit naging gay isang tao? There's still no consensus. Is it biological? Is it genetic? Is it cultural, di ba? So
environmental.
scientists are still debating. There's a lot of conflicting data of this, and we don't have that definitive answers yet as to explain the development of authentic and inauthentic sexuality. Secondly, nakita natin that biological factors serve as necessary. Kasi siyempre kailangan kung pinanganak ka, either male or female ka. So it's necessary but not sufficient contributors to the formation of authentic sexuality. Kasi it is not, so your birth sex is not what determines eventually your sexual identity. It can contribute, but it will not define.
So hindi siya absolute.
So today we know that it's true. Thirdly, socio-cultural factors serve as sufficient but not necessary contributors to the formation of authentic human sexuality. Ang sinasabi lang dito, how we perceive ourselves today, as our sexuality, our view about sex and our gender roles is actually based on cultural expectations and the prevailing understanding. However, it is not necessary for the formation of authentic human sexuality because we know that it is the biological factors that provides that. Tapos, we know that part of what comes out as authentic or inauthentic sexuality is part of the developmental process. So yung
may prosesong
yung mga problema na nakikita natin sa ating as human beings in terms of our sexuality, for example, issues of sexual abuse, issues of sexuality is a part of a process that we go through as human beings in our lifespan. So while biological factors are crucial in establishing sexuality early in life, sociocultural factors become more important when we grow older.
So may relationship actually yung dalawa, both the biological factors and sociocultural factors. So we're saying both are important. So it's not an either or.
And finally, the last 2 points. So social units katulad ng families, ating churches, other communities, even our society will vary greatly in the way they reflect God's design. Kasi for example, may mga pamilya na who are really biblical, who are really tawag doon rooted in the word, and they really are authentic in the way they raise their children. Meron mga families na broken then who let their children go through certain trauma or abuse. So not all families, not all churches, not all communities reflect God's design. And some of us might be in this situation where they go through the brokenness of families, of churches, of communities. That does not reflect God's design and meaning for human sexuality. And finally, yung sexuality, authentic sexuality and inauthentic sexuality, hindi yan black and white. Hindi siya binary, hindi siya dichotomous. Yun ang ibig sabihin. There's no black and white definition of what is authentic and inauthentic. They are only dichotomous in a moral sense. So ibig sabihin, when we look at it from the perspective of God's perspective, what is right and what is wrong from the biblical perspective, yun yung differentiation natin. But when we're actually dealing with a human being,
which is what we do every day.
Nung nakaharap ka na sa tao, hindi mo siya pwedeng i-label authentic sexuality, meron kang inauthentic sexuality. Most of the time, we are in this process. We are in this spectrum,
And
parts of your life might be expressing the God's design, and part of your life might not be.
And it takes a certain level of maturity, Dr. Alsena, to know how to, deal with this reality. So parang may spectrum, and dealing with the society, and how do you how do you deal with that? And then there's no one size fits all. Parang kaya it's important still that even in churches, in fellowships like this, we continue that kind of conversation.
So how do we redeem? How as Christians, how then do we act toward others? How do we develop this relationships that honors God's design for sexuality? So sa Bible, mayroong 4 na relationship themes that are described. The first is covenant relationship, which talks about loving and being loved. So this is found in Genesis 6:18, 17:4-7, Hosea 2:19, 20. And if you have the time, sa medyo kapsa tayo source, take a look at these Bible verses. But what is being shown here is that God, who has a covenant relationship with Abraham, with Israel, and eventually with us through Christ, has committed himself, no, to an unconditional love.
So it's
it is not
unconditional.
something that is conditional on our goodness, on our purity, but it is something unconditional. So he
And this
accepts
is
us for who we are.
this is God who made the covenant with us, and He's saying it's unconditional. So whether you change or not, I will continue that
implication on so in an
covenant.
authentic sexual relationship is meant to be an unconditional covenant commitment to a person. So no matter who the person is at that particular point of time, what he's or she is going through. When you talk about covenant relationship, you're talking about unconditional commitment to love the person. Secondly, yung relationship of grace, no? Genesis 3 verses 17. So remember Adam and Eve when they fell because they listened to the serpent and they disobeyed God, they felt ashamed, di ba? And however, God provided a means for them to be restored, to be redeemed. So God even clothed them, di ba? Even in their nakedness.
Despite
despite what had happened, God took care of them and pursued them. So it's accepting and being accepted
rather than
rejection,
placing blame, no, or shaming.
So an authentic sexual relationship, therefore, is meant to offer grace rather than place blame or shame. So therefore, when we are talking about authentic relationships, authentic sexual relationship, our priority is not to put blame or to shame the person, but to provide acceptance and forgiveness.
Exercise grace.
Exercise grace. Third is empowerment. So this is the concept of sexual relationship that because God came to us through Christ to give us life, no? To the full. Di ba yung ngayong as Christians, we were promised that He will give us waters of life, di ba? Overflowing water of life, no? Therefore, when we are in authentic relationship, we are meant to use all our resources and gifts
live
for
life,
empowerment rather than control.
And we have that promise, Charles, that we are given that promise that we will live life to the full and have it abundantly.
So we will have abundant life through Christ.
And I like this phrase, no? So not for control, but actually building each other up. Actually, in yung term na ginagamit sa Bible, no? In
build each other up as a church.
As a church and
as a community of faith.
A community and in the relationship also, no? So it's not control.
So we are called to empower others.
And when you're in a relationship, no, and empowering each other, no. So when you're in an intimate relationship, no, husband and wife, it's not the goal is not to dominate. Control or dominate, no, kasi mag-asawa na tayo, dapat sunod ka sa akin, no. But it's rather empowering, building each other up so that each of the other person, no, is able to live life to the full. I think that's part also of the design. So ang sinabi sa atin na promise, no, live life to the fullest and live it abundantly, kasama sa design is ginagamit ni Lord, no, yung kada isa, no, sa relationship.
Kaya nga, diba, sa isa sa mga, you have been blessed to be a blessing to others. So we have received the blessing, empowerment of God, so that we will also become a blessing to others. I think
that's why relationships are powerful also, no, because yun yung original design niya, so that we will also grow and grow together, no, building each other up.
So finally, yung intimacy, this is this relationship of knowing and being known. So intimacy, based on Psalm 139, very famous, is you have known me since I was in my mother's womb. You know,
you knit me together.
So even before we were born, God knows us. He knows every molecule of our body,
every DNA, to the smallest
gene, every design. God knows us on that deep level. So an authentic sexual relationship is meant to deepen one's experience of knowing and being. So isa doon sa expression of authentic sexuality is the privilege of getting to know a person better
and what a wonderful privilege is that, na parang sa buong mundo kasi ang hirap i-divulge yung self mo, but when you have an intimate relationship you can have that opportunity, no, or that platform and that privilege to be intimate, no, with a person, to experience knowing that person at a deeper level, at the same time also being known to that person. So it's a mutual uh, mating and meeting together, no? So that's intimacy in a relationship.
So those are the four essential relationships in the Bible. So if kung ilalagay mo siya sa isang parang illustration, ano, we start with the covenant commitment, ano, covenant commitment of God, ano, that unconditional love. However, may mga it becomes inauthentic because when we love someone based on certain conditions, then that becomes inauthentic sexuality, no? And then when you are in a relationship, but then you are shaming instead of being accepting, no? And the person, providing grace, no, and acceptance instead of rejection and shaming. If you shame a person, or if you blame a person, that becomes inauthentic sexuality. And then if you are in a relationship where you are, instead of empowering others, you seek control, then that is inauthentic expression of sexuality. Then finally, if instead of knowing and being known,
You distance
you
yourself.
distance yourself, that is an expression of inauthentic sexuality. Ano? And all of this, no, are interrelated to each other, no? So that finally, at the center, of course, of your authentic sexuality is your own relationship with God, ano? Your own connection with the source of life, ano? The source of all good gifts, which is God. And part of that, therefore, relationship is our expression of sexuality is the related deeply to our concept of spirituality. So yung relationship mo sa Panginoon ay reflected as well in your own relationships, no, to the others.
So in other words, Charles, in simple terms, if you want to experience authentic sexuality, it all comes down or boils down, no, to an authentic relationship with the Lord. So we can only know and experience the essence, no, of authentic sexuality if you experience that intimacy in spirituality also.
So the challenge, therefore, for us as young people, ano, as Christians, even us, no, as older Christians, we have this tendency, na sometimes our love is conditional. We tend to shame or blame the others, even our loved ones, who disappoint us. We seek control by using our resources over others. We seek to be manipulative instead of empowering others. And there's this tendency, human tendency, to distance ourselves, to isolate ourselves rather than risk intimacy and
Being
become vulnerable
vulnerable
to others. So the challenge as Christian, therefore, is to be committed towards the other people in a covenant way, unconditional commitment. We are challenged to be gracious to others. We are challenged to be empowering to others, and we are challenged to be open, to intimacy, and not hold back ourselves, but to freely expose ourselves to the pain and disappointments.
And that is not easy.
Yeah.
And that is
And
not easy. It's always a
always by the
daily,
grace of God.
yeah, it's
Only by the grace of God.
it's a daily journey only by the grace of God. So even I think no matter how old you are physically or by age or even spiritually, no, parang the journey continues daily only by the grace of God.
So in closing, we are saying here that we can express, our authentic sexuality only in the context of tawag dito, social structures, that provides us with a caring, supportive, tawag doon, environment, trust environment. And this starts, yung pinaka-inner dito, yung families natin. Because our families are supposed to love us unconditionally. We don't choose our family, we were born into our family. And families are supposed to be these covenant units, who love members of the family unconditionally. And that is a reflection of God's love, that covenant commitment to his people, that no matter who we are, where we are at this point of time.
So
We are
maganda
loved.
din siguro i-emphasize, Charles, that while we are not, while we cannot choose who our parents are, no, or our family, but eventually when we enter into an intimate relationship, we can build our family, and that decision already concerns us. We can choose. So if you had problems in your past family,
past family,
you have failures,
when you embark on a journey of creating your own family,
then now you have the decision.
you can provide this
can
kind of
provide.
environment, a covenant committed relationship.
So I think that's where redemption is, no? So parang you can say many things about what happened in the past, no? But moving forward, when you build
then,
your own family,
as Christians as well, you cannot live in isolation
Yes.
from the church.
so that's why the next sphere
next
is congregation,
social structure support is the level of the congregation,
church.
the church,
The church and the
koinonia, fellowship. Even our neighbor, no, because they provide support to us, a structure, because
even
they
intervarsity,
can
Christian
influence or
fellowship.
model, no, this authentic relationships, ano. Sabi mo pa nga, one of the things that redeem you from your own personal experience in the family is seeing other families in the church, no, that actually reflect God's design, and it become a source of inspiration as well.
So parang pwede kang mangarap,
pwede
no? And
pala
then
mangyari
pwedeng
yan.
one day, no, mangyari yun if you want to.
Growing up, you didn't experience this kind of loving, unconditional tawag ng commitment in your family. When you see a family in the church, in the congregation, it becomes, you know, an inspiration as well, and a support as well, that God is gracious and He could, you know, redeem you through this people who has God's given you in your church.
So
it's importante pala yun, ano, na nasa isang community tayo who provides support as well, provides modeling, provides correction.
So parang yun yung sinasabi, no, that when you were younger, marami kang balang araw. But now that you're in that position, maybe that balang araw is already now, no? So you can already act on it. So you have the power, you have the opportunity to change, no? And make decisions. So actually, the decision for the future, no, is already in your hands at the present.
And finally, yung pinakamalaking society. So although we are sometimes the minority, no, in our society as Christians, it does not stop us, no, from aspiring, no, to provide to advocate for changes, no, and to engage in dialogue or conversation with other members of society. That's why we engage in conversation with those people who do not subscribe, no, to our faith perspectives, and explain to them why we believe this way. And our hope is that we will move our society towards a more just, humane society that reflects God's design. Now, because we don't want to see families who are broken, you know, children growing up without parents, or who are being abused, by their parents. So knowing that there's a lot of issues, no, going on in our family, teenage pregnancy, even incest, incestuous relationship, or physical or sexual abuse in families.
A lot of hurt and
a lot of brokenness. We hope to tawag doon, build shalom, ano, or spheres where spaces in our society where God's design is reflected. And that is our hope as Christians, that ultimately we'll be able to contribute to the shalom.
And we can start with the families that we will be building.
And the communities that we are participating. Na mag-aspire tayo that more and more our society, our culture will reflect God's design for humanity. So I think that's the framework in which we can take a look at our issues, no, as Christians, dealing with issues of authentic sexuality. So maraming salamat sa inyong pakikinig. Alam ko that you have a lot of questions. I'm not sure if we're able to answer you live, Ate Medith, because we are going to another event this morning. But if we have the chance, we might, hopefully we can interact, God willing.
Kailangan daw mag-interact. Pagalitan ka ni Ate Lahi. Kuya Sam.
Okay, so
we'll see you later.
See you later. And,
we'll try to connect later. And yeah, we hope to continue this interesting conversation with you.
Okay, God bless everyone.